There's Charles. We have Charles Shirky. They're part of the Perception Farms team, and Mark Kalanga owns the property at 2547 to 53 North Pulaski, and then Thomas Ferreira is here to do any interpretation. Do we need translation for the meeting? He'll have a get paid for sitting here and looking good. Okay, so nobody needs. Yeah.
If there are main points, I think if we recorded, it would be helpful.
The neighborhood association. Okay. Do you want to flag in there anything that you think that is? I mean, we can go through the whole thing.
Sure.
Like your plan, we were going to do everything.
Sure. Yeah. I would say just maybe if you do major slides, maybe a summary in Spanish, a quick summary.
So today in particular, our meeting is really focused on, is a community meeting for rezoning the property at 2547 to 53 North Pulaski. It is, we have 5 dispensary applications in. We are going to be applying for craft grow application, or craft grow license. We do not have any licenses yet. And there will be multiple more community meetings that will be part of our approval to be in this space on Pulaski. I'm sorry, that was a lot. I think we're going to swap over. What do you think is a highlight from there?
Okay, so en el momento tienen una aplicación que es para dispensores y marzo 15 van a entregar otra aplicación que es para cultivación artesanal y ahorita están aquí para conversar con ustedes de esto.
And thank you all for coming out and squeezing in this room with us. Next slide, yeah, let me make sure I hit all my top key points. So who is Perception Farms? So we are a brand new startup cannabis incubator. Is this
Whatever you feel is.
There's a lot of things in the budget.
That's all right.
So I want to make sure everything's captured that we want to have.
Perception Farms es una empresa para ayudar a la cultivación de marihuana con una forma de social equity dentro de la ciudad de Chicago.
And so we partner with social equity applicants based on the state's definition from the House Bill 1438 that legalized. Sorry. We have a sign-in sheet going around as well. And contrary to what you might believe, so that the state has decided through the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity what areas have been negatively impacted by the war on cannabis, and that's who, by geography, gets to be eligible for being a social equity applicant, which is really important to the state's law. They're really trying to make reparations to communities that have been impacted by the war on cannabis. And so there's a map on the DCEO's website that identifies what parts of the city, it's not all of the city of Chicago, it's a really interesting map, that have been most impacted. And the other folks that are able to be eligible as social equity applicants are those that have records that are expungible underneath the new law.
Okay, social equity es un tipo de asistencia para la cultivación de marihuana que está haciendo la ciudad de Chicago, donde están ayudando a gente de socioeconómico situaciones poder trabajar más fácilmente con cannabis. O sea, si tú vienes de un barrio donde había problemas con marihuana, con drogas, tú perteneces de una de las zonas socioeconómicas, tienes oportunidad de ayudar a esta comunidad y esta empresa Perception.
So we are hiring everybody as employee owners of the company so that they actually have profit sharing interest in the company. I think that's important.
Todos en esta empresa está adecuado entre los de Perception Farms y también los de socioeconómico, los socios socioeconómicos. Ellos también son parte de la empresa y son socios. Entonces, esto es para que la gente de acá, de esta zona, también pueden ser socios de esta misma empresa.
And we are really trying to create a vertically integrated company. We applied for 5 licenses for dispensaries. We are going to, hopefully apply for as many as we can, which would be 10 dispensary licenses for the whole city of Chicago, as well as up to 3 craft grow licenses. But we're really trying to make vertically integrated companies so that we're selling what we're growing as much as possible. And really trying to compete with the big corporate groups that are already out there and have more grassroots organizations that aren't multi-state organizations working in the city.
Estamos aquí para trabajar con la gente y apoyar a la gente. Como las organizaciones grandes tienen mucho apoyo, aquí estamos nosotros entre la comunidad apoyando a todos ambos.
We're really focused on quality in our operation as well as our product, and that's going to be what we're focused on for growing. Use, okay. Computer fell asleep. So for the ward, what we feel like we bring to the ward is the ability to, hire from within the ward for that employee ownership and sharing that wealth in the cannabis industry that we all know is coming.
Entonces, una de las cosas que nosotros estamos trayendo hacia esta comunidad es parte de dar empleo a las personas de esta comunidad y también forma de socioeconómico ownership con la empresa. Trabajos con beneficios, pagando entre $18 la hora, de vacaciones pagados, médico, dental y futuro crecimiento en las carreras que hay.
All right, Thomas got ahead of me. So one of the other things is that we also have offer good benefits. So our starting pay is $18 an hour, paid vacation, medical, dental benefits, as well as training. Oh yeah, right. So we're helping people also transition, frankly, from the black market to the legal market. There are some people that we're working with that do work on the black market right now and really want to get into the legal market and are ready to make that transition, which is what the state is really trying to do. It's trying to move everything to the legal space.
También estamos ayudando los que trabajan en el mercado negro vendiendo cannabis. Nosotros queremos apoyar y ayudar a ellos a encontrar una forma de vender y hacer legalmente lo que están haciendo.
And we also are planning on hiring local artists to help actually decorate out the space and design the space internally. We want the space to be locally, feel like a community-based space, no matter which dispensary that we're talking about, as well as working with the community and community-based organizations to do drug education and other things that the state wants us to do.
Trabajar junto con la comunidad y hacer eventos educacionales y prevenciosos de drogas y todo eso y apoyar la comunidad como se puede mejor posible.
And I think one of the other, aside from ownership, one of the other really important things is us helping to transition. Transition in, training and education around this new industry, because most people do not have the education and aren't already working in the space, not only for the actual jobs, but also for business ownership. As everyone is going to be an employee owner, we really want to support that understanding of what it is to run a business and operate a business. We have a lot of our applicants have actually wanted to start their own companies, but don't have the resources to be able to do that. And so we really want to support people to be able to leave us and open up their own space too, if that's what they choose.
Estamos aquí para ayudar a la gente que no sabe cómo comenzar este proceso, en ayudarles comenzar el proceso y llegarle hasta el final. Estamos brindando cursos educativos para poder aprender cosas para trabajar en lo que es dispensores, en cultivación y eso. Entonces eso es otra parte de nuestro curso.
All right, the next slide. Okay, this is the one that doesn't have any notes. I made notes on another slide. I'm going to take a minute for it. Oh no, this is good. So this is just a visual of how the profits are going to be shared within the company. So the state requires that if you are applying as a social equity applicant, that 51% ownership of the company is owned by social equity applicants. One of the things that's very different is, come on in. Most companies that we know are applying that already are not in the market or are applying for additional licenses are hiring one person as their social equity applicant. Our model is everybody being an employee owner and sharing all of those profits. So that's very different than most of the companies that, for anybody that we understand is in the space and has put in applications.
En este modelo aquí tenemos el 51% de los socios dueños de esta empresa entre varias personas y el 49% es el Reception Farms. Así la empresa en un 100% es una empresa, pero 51% entre los de Social Equity y 49% Reception Farm. Este modelo es parecido, pero muy diferente que muchos otros que están aplicando para el Social Equity licencia, porque algunas empresas solo están poniendo una persona en vez de una comunidad. Y aquí nosotros estamos trabajando con la comunidad en vez de una sola persona.
Next slide. So this is a picture of the team members who are on our applications right now. So I think we have, aside from the founders, we have 26 people, 25 or 26 people. I should just count it up. I can tell you everybody's story about who's up here, but so each of our applications has a certain number of people on each application as an employee.
Estos son fotos de todos los socios de la empresa, nuestra empresa. Algunos son desde el comienzo y algunos son personas que han conocido y son de la comunidad y ahora están dentro de la empresa y son empleados, trabajan aquí y esas son sus fotos.
So in particular, what we offer the team members that want to partner with us is we help to set up the corporate structure, the shareholder agreements, the bylaws, all the things that you have to have in the state of Illinois to operate as a company, but also that you need for the state of Illinois in the application. We then support team members to be able to be on an application without bringing a whole bunch of money and resources to the table to be on that application. Like it's too hot in there. It's pretty warm. We provide again training and assistance, pay, as well as profit sharing.
Pues nosotros apoyamos y ayudamos a cada uno de esos socios para desarrollar todas sus herramientas posibles para trabajar en lo que es cultivación de cannabis y todo eso.
Okay, the rest of this is going to go a little bit faster because it's mostly pictures of what the place might look like. Can you just flip the next slide? So, as I said, we would have both a craft grow and a dispensary in the location at 254753 N Pulaski. There are a lot of hoops that we need to jump through still, especially on the dispensary side to get us there. So this is our ideal situation, is having both of those things located there. And part of why we're having this meeting is because the building has to be rezoned. It's not zoned properly to be able to house either one of these operations, according to the City of Chicago's cannabis ordinance. I kind of went off of that. Did you follow me enough? Okay. And so the craft grow allows us to grow, process, and then also create edibles. So that's one license, and then the dispensary is the retail space where you can come in and buy under the law of adult use cannabis.
Entonces tenemos varios tipos de licencias. Tenemos una licencia que es para comestible, para comer, consumir, infusión. También tenemos una licencia que es para dispensario y también uno para cultivación. Cultivación artesanal y dispensario son los que estamos aplicando ahorita para esta licencia.
Next slide. So I think you all are familiar with this building that's been about empty, I think, over 11 years now, that this would be the proposed site, the site that we're looking at rezoning. So again, 2547 and 2553 North Pulaski.
Esto es el lugar donde queremos construir el dispensario y la cultivación.
And the inside of the space, which I know some of you have been in already. And this was in the Block Club Chicago, this picture as well.
Esto es una foto del interior de la bodega.
So this is a proposed rendering of what the space would look like. At this point, this is our proposed rendering. There is no change to the lot lines. There's no increase to the overall increase to the building height. It's very similar to what it looks like now, but it's cleaning it up, making it a little bit more attractive for retail clients, especially to come in.
Esta es una foto de cómo podría ser la ubicación en el futuro con el apoyo de ustedes.
So depending on what licenses and what we're actually able to run in the space, we have different. We would like to, if we're successful in getting the dispensary and the grow in the space. These are examples of what the dispensary might look like. And also in the Block Club Chicago article, one of the things I said is that has anybody been in a dispensary yet? Yeah. In Chicago, I guess I should say, because most of them don't feel like this, and we're really trying to make this, it's a legal place to be, and a legal place to spend your money. And so we really want it to feel not like a clandestine operation, which is frankly how most of the operations feel like in Chicago right now.
Entonces, más o menos esto es cómo queremos organizar el interior de la parte de ventas. Mayormente, muchos dispensarios en Chicago tienen una temática más parecido a prisión, y esto es algo más abierto, más amistoso. Como es algo que ahora es legal, queremos que la gente se siente cómoda y a gusto mientras están así mirando productos.
So our floor plans also include growing rooms, so it's vegetative and flowering, depending on how much you know about the process.
Esto es un diagrama del proceso de la cultivación. Aquí a la mano derecha tenemos la parte vegetativa y aquí la parte de la cultivación donde están haciendo lo que se llama flowering.
Next slide.
Are those the floor plans of the building?
They are. They're proposed ones, and I will say with the caveat that now that the craft grow requirements are out, there's going to be some modifications for a lot of reasons, including the state security plans and all the requirements, all of that. Yeah. And we would also then ideally again have the dry cure space and the trim areas, and things rotate around the building depending on what stage they're in. And then this is a sample of what part of the infusion process would look like. So this is
Extraction.
Extraction, thank you.
And
So,
prop.
yeah. So that would be a sample of what the processing to get into the edibles would get to.
Bueno, también esto es un diagrama de la parte de la curación y la parte de la cosecha de lo que es el cannabis. Aquí se puede ver cómo se puede hacer.
The next slide is the last one. So yes, we are ideally hoping to have both a dispensary and a craft grow in the location on Pulaski, and it requires a zoning change, which this is the community meeting for that specific zoning change. And we've got our license applications in for the dispensaries, and we'll hear more about that. May 1st is that deadline, when the state will notify who's successful, and then July 1st is when we'll hear if we're successful getting getting a license for the craft grow. Thank you all for joining us, and what kind of questions do you have for us? I have cards as well as I will take notes to make sure. Actually, somebody has my my
Oh, no.
notebook, just so I make sure that I take anything. Yes. What's your question?
Do any of you live in the city or live in the community?
So I live in Berlin now, but I grew up in Chicago. Yeah.
I live down the block.
We're aware of both Chicago residents, having Rogers Park is on Sunset.
Okay, so do you think that other social equity applicants who actually do live in this community deserve a first crack at opening up in the neighborhood before you do it?
Sure, if they're able to apply. Yeah. It's a hard process. Yeah.
And we would very much like to
Yep.
partner and find those people, by the way, to
Yep.
engage them in order to help them do
Yeah.
that.
And like we said, if there are a lot of people who have come to us that want to open up their own dispensary or their own craft grow and can't do it right now, and so they want to learn the process too. And so it's got like an ability to learn through working with us.
So I'll live around the corner. What comes first, the craft grow or the dispensary?
Logistically, if we were to get approved for both licenses, May 1st get the dispensary license, and then July 1st.
So you're applying first for the dispensary license?
That's how the state set it up. Yeah.
Okay.
So we will know 2 months in advance. However, the city's process for the special use permit will slow everything else down, and then the growing will take a little while to get the mothers up and then actually be able to harvest. So we would start build out probably if we're successful. Everything actually falls in line. I'll probably do construction sort of in September for both places.
But in short, the dispensary could open up first.
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
you're just going to be trailing by 6 to 8 weeks on any real production.
But there's so many wild cards in the
Sure.
process that it's a little bit hard to predict
Sure.
which one will come.
So the reason why I bring it up,
Yes.
This is why I bring it up.
Yes.
I mean, I don't necessarily have anything against the grow facility. I don't
Yeah.
have anything necessarily against the dispensary. When you put them together, it's kind of like a super dispensary. It's kind of something different. And I get the appeal of wanting to do that, you know. And I guess that's where the concern comes in for me, because then for me, I'm kind of circling back to some of the concerns that were voiced about the venue,
Yeah.
effects to the community. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
both
Yep.
ideas freestanding, like are I don't think I would have any problem with whatsoever. But then when you combine the two, it kind of seems like it's something different.
Yeah, and
Well,
honestly,
I would say on that,
yeah.
in Colorado, for instance, you're required to have the dispensary and the grow vertically integrated in the same location. And the reason why it's not just that we want it to be a super dispensary, but we want the people who are selling at the dispensary to be actually in touch
Sure.
with the product and be able to offer the most.
I totally into the concept of urban farming. I love it. The more important, I just want that we're essentially we're creating a destination.
Yeah.
We're creating a larger.
That's the
hopefully,
intention.
You know,
But,
of course.
but also, and particularly for the dispensary, right, we're just trying to get the building zone so we have the potential to put these businesses there. Regardless of whether or not that happens, part of the entire process will require that we have another community meeting, right? And so if there's an objection from the community, I guess what I'm saying is there's lots
So
of
essentially,
chances
you
to
would
stop it.
start with the dispensary. Sort of like prove. I mean, I'm just looking from a neighbor.
Even if we
standpoint.
want to open a
like
dispensary.
prove that everybody's a good neighbor, right? And then there would be the application for the.
No, the craft grow comes March 16th. We have an application. The date of award is July 1st. The date of award for the dispensary is May 1st. But what I'm saying is that post licensing, even if we win licenses, step one is to get the building rezoned so we can even apply for a craft grow. And then step two will be required to get special use permits from the city in
Step
order
two
to
is getting a lottery ticket.
Lottery
and
ticket
actually get
into the
northwest
right
side
ward,
of
right.
Chicago.
But then finally, we will have to go through another community process and engage the community again. And so if you are concerned at that stage, there's still plenty of opportunity, as much as I might prefer not. There's lots of opportunities for the community to stop this thing, even post licensing. So even once we have our licenses, if the community says no, okay, we were okay with the zoning change for the building to give you the potential, but later on we have decided that we don't want this here, you'll have that opportunity to stop it. And it's a very important distinction.
And I will say, if we're successful in getting any licenses, I don't know that especially on the dispensary side, my guess is that the zoning board of appeals, that the lottery will happen sometime in May. And then you have to go through the rest of the process. And so the city is divided up, the city is divided up into 7 areas. And you can only have 7 dispensaries this round in each area. And I think that there's at least 2 or 3 already in the northwest side. So there's like 4 openings possible in this area out of all of the licenses that are.
So the probability is pretty, actually, if you calculate the probability, which you can, it's actually quite low that we're going to get everything we want to be able to put both businesses in this building. In order to fight for the chance, the building needs to be rezoned.
But the first step would be for the growth facility.
It depends on how it all shakes out in terms of our interaction with the city and the special zoning approval and everything else. So I don't think that there's any way to predict which one would open first.
What zoning are you applying for?
Right now, the building is zoned M1, and we are seeking a zoning of C3-1.5.
And is that
For both dispensary
Take
and?
one.
That would allow us to have both in there. You have to be zoned either C2 or C3 to have a dispensary and a craft grow in the same location.
And that would be just for that kind of business?
Yes.
If
Well,
the
no,
zoning
any
is
other-
limited to that kind of
No,
business, or what kind of business?
there's an
Special
entire,
use is
yeah.
the zoning that we have, the permit to allow for cannabis business.
But C3 is far more general than that. And it's a type of zoning that actually exists as a buffer between manufacturing, industry, and residential. So it's quite appropriate for this location, which actually does border those. So it would open it up to a lot of different types of businesses if we don't make the mark and if we're not able to open
Can you
it.
give an example?
But the other
Point
one
of
was,
information, no, because you're gonna do a type 1, so it fits the plan, so if it doesn't happen, it goes back to M1.
Well, that's, yeah, thank you
yes,
for clarifying.
clarifying what you meant by a type
Yeah.
1. Yes.
Out of all the applicants, how many are from this neighborhood?
Right now, there's not any from Ward 31. Yeah.
Is there any warranty that there's gonna be people from the neighborhood?
Sure.
Like a percentage?
Yeah,
of
I mean,
people?
we can, so we didn't have to put anything in there for the dispensary. We can do something like that. So the applications that we turn in are contracts with the state, so we have to fulfill them. There's no reason why we can't do that. And we probably, I think, we could say from the ward or the community area that we're looking at, as long as there's social equity applicants.
And for the dispensaries, we actually wanted to do that, sort of tie the employee ownership pool to the neighborhood that would be open in. But the city, for its own reasons, has created a distribution method where you have to enter a lottery so they can distribute the dispensaries across the city, and that's actually made that more difficult to us. But what makes us really unique in the social equity space that I don't think anybody can really touch is, the 51-49% split is really built into like our DNA as a company, and so it's a perpetual thing. So future employees will come on, and over X amount of time, their ownership will vest in the company.
And that could be neighborhood people?
And we would love for it to be neighborhood. Not only could it be, but it is part of our core mission as a company that they be neighborhood people that are tied to that.
How many people will split that 51%?
Yeah, so for the craft grow, it's gonna start at, the state allows you to start at 5,000 square feet of flower and canopy, and then it can go up to 14,000 square feet. We anticipate up to 50 jobs for the craft grow alone, and probably 10 for the dispensary. So
50 at the initial or at that extent?
that's the
At the max.
Yeah.
Probably starting around 10, 12, or 15.
So then, compared to other, social equity applicants who may have 100% of their team social equity based, or 51% that sits in the hands of a few individuals that are Chicagoans, what's special about taking 51% and splitting it up across 60 people?
Because then it's distributing that wealth instead of just staying with one person.
But 49% is not at all distributed, whereas in the other model, social equity could be 100%, right?
Well, yes, but
Yes, it could be.
but what we're offering, I think what you're asking is that, our goal is to sort of like have a perpetual transfer of wealth, right? So that 51% being baked into our DNA, that's perpetual, right? So if one employee decides to leave, right, and they get cashed out, right? They cash out their stock, right? And they leave the company to start their own business, which, by the way, we would be very happy to help incubate that as well, right?
Yeah, I agree. It's just that the 49% stays out of social equity hands for always, which is really different than other models that people are putting up there.
But nobody else is committing in perpetuity to a social equity split. And then we're not just providing application support.
People like Cresco are doing with their seed program, right? What deals is Cresco doing when they set up social equity applicants? We don't know.
That's true. I don't know specifically. I do have some idea and some intuition. But the other part of it is that we're not just providing application support, like we're just going to come in and put your name on the apps and then the business is going to open up and then we're going to disappear and become owners. We are providing an entire turnkey solution. So it's like, if you have a Panera opening up in your neighborhood and you hire locally from the neighborhood, the staff at Panera, you train it, right? We're that turnkey solution with the caveat that we are also giving ownership stake in it, in addition to high-paying jobs, in addition to the benefits. And so we're ensuring that entire benefits, entire high-paying structure, and the turnkey solution, right? All of the upfront costs. And so in order to make it attractive not only for our time, right, and our effort, but also to the investors that we need to bring in, and all the people that you need to bring into the table to get this idea into a reality, it's impossible to do without that kind of split.
I mean, I like the 51%. I don't know if it's impossible at 49%. That's sort of maybe the number that you all have drawn for yourselves to make it financially attractive to all of you as investors.
The state's requirement is 51.
Oh, you could get more. You get more, right? You don't have to limit yourself there. 51's the starting point. That's the entry point.
We started with 100, believe it or not. But as we developed the strategy more and more, it became quite clear that to do it that way had some real sort of fundamental issues that were actually far more parasitic than the honesty of splitting it up in a way that we could bring everybody to the table. So the way that we view ourselves is as the thing, right, that links up you know, people who bring in social equity capital, right?
You're
And
conduit, you're conduit,
right.
you're
And
conduit,
we're
but-
also management.
Conduit that retains 49%.
But we're not just, we're also management, we're also going to create the turnkey solution, we're also going to manage, right, and we're also going to train. Well, it's more than a conduit because, you know, we'll be working every day there.
So I think that's a fair question. I'll give you my perspective. So
Who are you, sir?
My name is Mark Flang. I own the building.
Okay.
So in the course of my ownership of the buildings, which has been since last April, there have been 6 groups that have come through that have wanted to do what these people are doing. 5 of them had an ownership individual or 2 or 3 partners that were the owners, and for their social equity component, they had brought in somebody that they would call a CEO or a COO that in some cases had, one case for instance, that person had a felony charge, a past felony charge for cannabis possession, and that would give them a lot of points in the application procedure. And each of those 5 groups had a model like that, where there were 1, 2, or 3 owners, but they were hiring in 1, 2, or 3 individuals that had that would provide that social equity component. I was impressed with this group because they were offering 51% of the ownership to a lot of people, their employees, and at least from my limited knowledge based on the prospects that were interested in doing this in that space, they were leaps and bounds beyond what anyone else was offering to a group of social equity individuals.
Can I ask, I want to get to your question, but what, I live in Berwyn now, but I've been otherwise, I was born and raised in Chicago, and I've always worked in Chicago. What would we put in that you would feel comfortable with around community hiring? Because you've got community areas, you've got wards, the neighborhoods, seriously, what would you feel comfortable with in terms of hiring from locally? Like, cause there needs to be a real something to hold on to that I would love your suggestions of what you think would be comfortable.
Are you talking about boundaries? What would define a community member?
If we were doing local hiring, how would you define that?
It's so difficult because the areas are split up 8 different ways. We all even have different zip codes, etc. So.
We'd be happy to take suggestions of how to define that, and we can distance.
Yeah, distance would be the easiest.
Yeah, because that way's one neighborhood, that way's another neighborhood, that you're in the middle.
Yeah. Last time when they were voting for something else, it kind of split in a way that we are really close, but just because we were north of one street, we couldn't even have a vote. So, and this is something that affects all of us. Because it just,
Yeah, okay, so I know that we have, and I want you to be able to say something, so go ahead and say.
Yeah, that makes the most sense.
And what I would like to do is to look at the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunities map to find out who qualifies as social equity too. Because my guess is that the eastern parts of Logan Square that are just east might not even qualify to the state as a social equity applicant. So I guess I want to look at that so that we're having a
What makes someone social?
it's based on the state's map
Relative bound,
from the
kind of like how you,
yeah.
yeah,
And
exactly.
Lived in that area.
so on that particular map, it's blue, and that means you're in an impacted area. I will come back to you. I want to
There's
answer
2
your
other
question.
ways as well.
Yeah.
One of them is that you have a charge that's expungible under the law, right, under the cannabis recreational law, or that you have a parent and perhaps a sibling, but don't hold me to that one, but a parent who has been convicted of a cannabis charge that is expungible under the law. And those are the 3 ways to qualify as a social equity candidate. And there's also a 4th way, by the way, where as a company, if we had hired 51% of social equity candidates, just hired them, not given them part ownership, not put them on the application, but just had that percentage of our employee pool being social equity candidates, we could have qualified under social equity status under that provision. We didn't do that. right? We wanted to push this ownership concept forward.
So what I will do after this is figure out what the right radius is, and maybe I can be in contact with some of you about that. Sorry, I hope I'm talking loud enough now. I think I came down in my voice when I wasn't in presentation mode. To figure out what a good radius would be, because it actually can be pretty far, and it's still pretty local hiring. Yeah, without it being in like 500 feet away, because that's not really that far at all. Yes.
So who could actually apply for this job? Does it have to be somebody with social impact like that? I'm trying to figure out how this works.
Yeah. So we have to maintain 51% ownership from social equity candidates. That's part of the license requirements, and that's how we put in our application. And so outside of that, we can hire other people that are local that are social equity applicants. Yeah. So on our website, and I can give you my card too. We're trying to just get the applications in right now, and then once we know we're successful, then we'll be opening back up for hiring. Yeah. But there's forms on our website to actually say that you're interested, and we can put you in our process. You can take my card too. Yes, Casey.
Just a quick question. I just want to know, like, the hours of operation of this because it's more in a neighborhood setting as opposed to the one that's on Fullerton in Milwaukee, you know, where they have more of the bars. But like a typical Monday through Friday hours of operation, and then as far as the growing, I think we should know that as well.
Yeah. So for the grow, it's technically, it could be a 24-hour thing, but the public isn't able to go into that. Because depending on where you are in the process, you might need to be, it's like, okay, all the plants need to be harvested now. The plan is to distribute that, so it's not happening all at once, and it's more of a 9 to 5 situation for anybody who works there, but it can be outside of that. The dispensary, the state allows dispensaries to be open between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. We've talked about, and the alderman has also said, let's cut it off at 8 o'clock. So we've been talking about 8 to 8 for the dispensary, so it's not too late. Yeah. And that would be actually all 7 days a week. You still have been waiting patiently, thank you.
I'm just curious of where you found and how did you kind of select the 25 employee owners?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so we did some social media outreach. We did a lot of like targeted advertisements based on how people were searching on the web, what they were searching for, zip codes, to make sure that we were meeting the state's social equity requirements. We interviewed a lot of people, and actually a lot of them funneled themselves out for different reasons. Like they just didn't come to the interview. They didn't, there were things that, I don't know. So I do the first level of intake. I am sure I talked to at least 120 people from all over the city and beyond the city too.
So there wasn't any partnership with any local community organizations or workforce development programs?
No, because for the dispensaries, there is no location that you have to apply for, so it's citywide.
But there wasn't any engagement with like a workforce development program to
No,
get
that's me. That's my role with the organization. Yeah.
And then speaking specifically to his point about the 49%, how many people represent that 49%?
It will change. Right now there are, right now there are 3 people. It's just the 3 of us. As we have investors to pay for the build-outs, to actually get all the product in there, it's going to change. And we don't know what that's going to look like yet.
And we're bringing that investment on our side, right?
Yeah.
And so that's another reason that, our 49% at the end of the day, on an individual level, isn't going to be, for the partners, significantly much more than, some of the employees, right? Because we're bringing people in on our side to make it a reality.
And then just one question about the language you're using, because it's like you kind of like go between employee and owner.
Yeah.
And like if this is a co-op space, as I believe this is supposed to be, like, are they all owners? Are they, because you mentioned earlier, employees where they're making $18 an hour, which is
Everyone's
great.
an employee owner. That's the structure.
They're all employee owners.
But we
Okay.
do guarantee a high standard of living, benefits package, and then, post that, after the business is solvent, that's when the profit sharing aspect will come in.
And our, the profits are actually split equally across all the people on the employee ownership. Like pay might be different per position, so a manager making more than a bud tender, but the profits will be split evenly.
Right. And it's also another point is that part of the selection process, while we are being selective in the sense that, you know, we need red flags, right? People bring red flags to the table, we pay attention to that kind of thing. But we are intentionally not being overly selective. It's very important to us from a philosophical point of view that the employee ownership pool, right, that distribution of people look very much like the reality of the distribution of people that were affected by the war on cannabis, right? And so, you know, we want people to have the opportunity to become employee owners, right? And we want that distribution of people that, you know, to look like it actually looks out in the real world. And so one thing that we do know about the Crestos and some of these other social equity strategies is it's more of an American Idol type of thing where they pick the best of the best, the creme of the crop. They have a huge competition, they take a few people, and then at the very, you know, and then those are the people who win the lottery. It's a one-time thing, those people get part ownership, and then that's it, right? We are actively trying to fight against that concept so that we have a method of perpetual wealth transfer to the community, right? But also that we actually capture the distribution of the real world.
I know all three of you have a question, so I'm just gonna go back. Okay, go ahead, Michael.
I'm not a lawyer, but
Yeah.
for example, what if you have the set structure that you have, investor comes in at 49% and says, hey, I just want to buy the license. What kind of protections do you have for the 51%? Does that make sense?
I might pass it back to Walter, but
Okay.
everything is legally codified already to protect that from actually being able to.
There's a segregated class of shares, which are social equity shares, and those can never be diluted below 51% as per the shareholder agreement. So we're the minority on that shareholder agreement. The 51% social equity class has 3 board positions, and we have 2.
So when we say that it's baked into the DNA of our company, we really mean it in the sense that we have put these provisions in our shareholder agreement, so that way we can't do, as you're saying, just sort of push everybody out once we have the licenses, which we feel a lot of the other companies that are trying these kinds of strategies or similar strategies, that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to wait the 1-year mark, and after the 1-year mark, then social equity candidates can sell their licenses, and that's what's going to happen, right? And so we've set it up to where that can't happen, right? And even if all those social equity candidates that we got the license with want to sell, we have to bring in another 51% ownership of employee owners to replace them.
Yeah, and it's again baked in the bylaws and the shareholders agreement, and employee owners are gonna be on the board leading that and making a lot of the decisions. Frankly, like there's provisions in, you may or may not want to even notice. There's questions in the application that are like, are you going to have a union? Are you going to be part of the union? And we're like, our employee owners need to make that decision, because if we're making all of the decisions for people, then it's not going to be actually employee ownership. Okay, we're going to work back here and then there, and then we come back up to you. Yes?
What does security look like around the facility? You mentioned some state requirements.
Yeah.
I live across the alley. Should I expect armed guards in my alley?
Not in the alley. What is the,
So,
there's a lot of.
So security is, also from an internal point of view, something we take incredibly seriously, but also from the state point of view, something that's a serious requirement, right? And so we've partnered with 2 companies. One is KL Security, who is a banking security company, and they're sort of taking care of the technical aspects of the security. So cameras, vaults, key cards for controlled access into rooms, that aspect of it. And then we partnered with another company to actually do physical security. And the physical security will be armed guards. We have a lot of talk about this, but ultimately we decided, given the nature of the business, it was smarter to have armed guards. And also you have to state on the application whether or not you intend to have armed guards or not. So
There'll be armed guards inside during operating hours. And then there'll be, security company that will be coming and perpetually visiting across the day and across the night. And so, we've invested a lot of resources into making sure that it's a secure building and that it's safe.
Also, all loading and unloading happens inside the building.
Right, that's very important, right? So there won't be any disruption outside. We have, and even the waste is brought inside the building, right? So our waste is being held there. So even for, getting rid of waste, then we'll just open the door when it's time and then remove the waste at that time. And we'll also be taking care of odor protection as well to make sure that we're not, that we're good neighbors. So it's very important for us that we're good neighbors, okay? And we actually don't want to be there if we're not welcome, right? Because we want a long-term relationship. We want a long-term relationship with the community. We have this employee ownership model, which ties us in a very fundamental way to the community. And so it's important that it's a symbiotic relationship. And if it's not, it just won't work. And we'll go find something, someplace else to do.
So you mentioned that the profit sharing aspect of the social equity program really only kicks in after the business reaches solvency. What's the estimated timeline after the applications get approved, it gets built, before the business becomes solvent?
So I would say our estimates, and again, Walter is going to be, he can say if I'm wrong or not. Once we're open, there's likely about 2 years before profit sharing is actually is able to come into place. And that's just an estimate. Like you're just, you're guessing based on how much the startup costs will be, and then when you should be able to pay down those loans based on what your sales are and all of that. It's really complicated. So that's actually why my specific talking points for the one slide was not there. We talk about medium-term profit sharing interest because it's not immediate. Nobody's going to see any profit immediately.
But that's also an important point because part of the reason that we're ensuring or guaranteeing high, good wages, right, is for that very reason. One of the there are many barriers to social equity candidates to actually, becoming licensed and opening a business. One of them is the huge cost associated with the application fee or the application itself and getting this application built, which is 500 to 1,000 pages. Another is not everybody is in the position to not make money for a few years while their business gets off the ground, right? And so, that's part of the reason that we're offering that. And it does push solvency out a bit, right? Because we are doing that, but we think it's the better approach. And the way to actually create social equity employee owners is to make sure that they're receiving good pay from day one in this start.
My question involves, you said that 51% will be employee ownership, and that if it goes below 51%, that you'll be replacing those to maintain that 51%. If you do not, what kind of penalties are there involved?
The state can take your license.
What are they?
Take
You know any of them?
away.
Just take the license away.
But that
We
can't
don't want
happen.
that to happen.
Right. It can't happen because if people leave the pool, that 51% will get redistributed amongst the people that are there. So that 51% is sort of perpetually distributed among the employees.
Yeah, but if we were even to go like 50-50 and the state figure that out, that's it. We don't want to go there. Yeah.
So you said that 49% is also going to be sold with investors, personal investors. Are you looking at, huge investments, or is this something that will be open to many people?
So, yeah,
I'll take it.
Yeah.
So,
These are financial.
There's a lot of nuance around securities law, and certainly we're mostly focused on delivering with minimal amount of investment at this point, solid applications. Once we actually are licensed, we have access to two things: state grants and low interest rate loans set aside specifically for this cannabis program, right? So the state wants to bootstrap companies like ours if they're successful. Now, if we need capital above and beyond that, these craft grows take, depending on how extreme you get with it, between $2 and $3 million to build out. We might be able to cover half of that with state loans. to bring, at that point.
I'm gonna interpret that you could potentially be interested in investing.
Right. So then my follow-up there is, you know, if you are an accredited investor, we can talk to you today, but we're probably not going to actually make any moves until after licensing because there's no real valuation on the company that is tangible. Today we're doing financing through a sort of edge case on convertible notes, and it's for very small amounts. I've personally invested close to $100,000 into this project, and I'm tapped out. And we're talking to smaller investors at this point in time that are connections that we're not advertising for it because that's illegal. But we are organically finding opportunities to have that conversation.
And just to cover our costs. Yes.
Could you walk me through the timeline once again? The zoning variance is given, and then
Yeah. So May 1st, we will know if we've gotten any dispensary licenses. And the dispensary licenses over 4,000 for 75 licenses for the whole state of Illinois. So statistically speaking, we think we have a great model and we did well on the application, but just for your own processing and perspective, it's super clear.
so May 1st, you find out if you get the license for the dispensary.
Yes. Then, so for the dispensary process, then the zoning board of appeals for the city of Chicago, you have to come to them and say, we want to put in for the lottery to actually open a dispensary in the city. And then you get put in a lottery process. Then if you get picked first, and then we could pick, if we got picked first, then we could pick whatever open of the 7 zones that the city has already predefined to open a dispensary. And then we have to work within that area, which if we happen to be first, we might be able to get to this location. It's unclear about that, but and then then we have to apply for the special use permit, which requires more community meetings and
the special use permit would be for the growing aspect?
Both of them need a separate special use permit, so that would be for the dispensary. So there's a lottery for the dispensary, then the special use permit.
So you're going.
Yeah.
There's 2 lotteries. No,
There's
one
not-
lottery is
there's
only
not
for
a
the
lottery
dispensary.
for the craft.
No lottery for the craft grow, both special use. And the number that people are kicking around in the community is around 6 months from license to wrapping up the special zoning process. Perhaps a little bit longer for the dispensary because there's also the lottery component.
So what do you guys anticipate? I mean, if everything goes according to plan, that's your time.
I'm sorry?
We think the earliest we would be able to open the dispensary is the earliest would be January 2021. And the earliest we'd be able to be actually selling our own, harvesting our own product, we think is like July, August of 2021.
Because I still circle back to the issue of
I hear
scale.
you. Yeah,
It's
I hear you.
scale.
Yeah,
Because I mean, Mark, we're involved in the conversation about the music venue. I'll argue that that was one of the reasons that kind of lost some of the people that lived immediately around it was scale. It kind of freaked you out when it was like, wait, how big is this again? It's 1,000 people. So I think that's kind of the
Yeah, I mean, just by the numbers alone, I think our chances of being able to open a craft grow and that's it at that location is probably what is like that. Just by the numbers, that's what.
And the dispensary, by the way, is capped out by law if you have craft grow dispensary location in the same place. You can only have, I think, a max of 3,000 square feet. Now, on our plans, the dispensary is less than that. I think it's around 1,500, maybe 2,000 square feet. And so, that will give you a sense of, how many people could possibly be in there at any one given time. It's not a huge retail space, but a fairly small retail space.
But in scale, when I say scale too, I'm not just talking about foot traffic. I'm talking about like the overall effects to the community. If it's a dispensary, but then it's a dispensary plus a grow facility plus it's this big. It's just it's a multiplier.
Yeah.
What if it were a marble factory?
That's
It'd
be a lot more truck traffic. What kind of zoning variance do you need for Marvel?
Could be a lot more truck
I mean,
traffic.
it's true, it is, and we're, I'm not gonna lie, we're going for special.
Oh, I get
Right,
it.
and
I
we
get
wanna
it.
be special, okay, but, it's an unknowable, okay, and I don't know how to answer your question in a way that might satisfy you, because we don't know, A, if it's possible, right, and then B, what the consequences of it, are if it is, right, and so, I think the best that we can do is in an honest way, want to keep an open line of communication with the community, right? So we can, address concerns in the future if they come up, right? So we can, one of the things that we're planning on doing is making sure that we secure some private parking, possibly across the street, right? So if there is a lot of traffic or if there is a lot of foot traffic, that we're able to sort of offload the parking onto sort of private parking lot that doesn't disrupt the neighborhood, right? And those kinds of conversations we're very willing to have, and
They're two discrete spaces, so the grow facility is the large building, the atrium, and that's, everything's blocked off, obfuscated from the street. So it's not like you see a lot of plants, or it's all, everything is, by law, has to be blocked off. So in that grow facility, which is the big portion of the space, there'll be, starting maybe 10 employees and up to like 40 employees or something like that.
Is there anything like this comparable in the city of Chicago right now?
No, there's not. And there's not, you really have to go to Colorado to see anything comparable.
Because I mean, I'll be honest, like the first thing I looked up was online, and you could find both sides of this, right? How would something like this affect the immediate community around it? And there's arguments on both sides.
And it's such an unknown.
And it's,
Especially Chicago and Illinois, because they're starting out so small, they're trying not to saturate the market like happened in
Right.
California and Colorado.
Right.
And so,
And it's not comparable to those states or Washington, where I lived for a few years, where I kind of witnessed legalization in Washington. It's not comparable to those states because those states have other problems, right? They have other drivers of inequality, other drivers of change, right, in those cities, particularly in Seattle or in Denver. And those types of problems, right, that don't necessarily transport to Chicago, right? There's no Amazon like there is in Seattle that's ruining it for everybody, right? So you can't pay rent, right? And Chicago's a much bigger city. There's much, much, much more real estate, right? It's much more of like an open market. And so it's hard to make these comparisons. And, we are out, kind of at the cutting edge. We don't know all the answers.
Yeah.
Do I understand that if you do not get the dispensary license, the whole project is dead?
No.
So growing would still be there, and that's an easier process?
Yes. If
Okay,
we,
for
if we get a
licensing,
license,
right.
We're still in the game.
In line with that then, what kind of background does anyone have with regard to urban farming and that sort of thing?
So we can answer it a couple of ways. I have most of my career here has been with the city of Chicago in open lands, working on community gardens and school gardens and growing. But really, we have people that we're bringing in that are from other states to help train up our team to really take the lead on all of those roles.
Would this be hydroponic, or would it be soil, or?
Drip, cocoa core.
Yeah.
Effectively soil.
So you don't have to haul in 10,000 tons of dirt from somewhere.
And especially in indoor space like a greenhouse sort of setting, then there's so many more pests that are potential, and then
And we're looking at creating indoor enclosures, right? That'll sort of contain everything, right? So we'll be building up these little 400 square foot.
Sounds very sophisticated.
Well, we hope so. Yeah.
It's not your first day working on it.
Well, we've been working on it for several months, but to be blunt, we do not have cannabis-specific experience. We are coupled with professionals from the field in Colorado that we're partnered with, that is going to be helping us to train us and train the social equity candidates that we're, our partners that we're working with. Yeah, in order to get the job done.
Which actually, I like better because then it allows everyone that we're hiring in the company to actually be able to be the owners of that knowledge and that forward. Yes, sir.
So those individuals who come in from Colorado or wherever state to help with growing, would they would have an equity stake as well?
No, they have no equity stake. No, they're
Consultant.
just getting paid to help train up and set up things. Yeah.
Service agreement.
Yeah. Anybody else? I appreciate all of you. So, perceptionfarms.com. I know we've been getting emails and contacts since we've been in here. So, some of you have figured out the website. I have my card here as well. If anybody wants my card, or you have any more questions for us, thank you for joining us. Especially some of you I know it's been so notice. And getting warm in this room with us. Thank you.